with great power, O God, and rescue me. Defend me with your might. Listen to my prayer, O God. Pay attention to my plea. For strangers are attacking me. Violent people are trying to kill me. They care nothing for God. But God is my helper. The Lord keeps me alive. May the evil plans of my enemies be turned against them. Do as you promised and put an end to them. I will sacrifice a voluntary offering to you. I will praise your name, O Lord, for it is good. For you have rescued me from my troubles and helped me to triumph over my enemies. These are the words of Psalm 54, a psalm of lament. These psalms cry out to God when the psalmist is in the midst of suffering or oppression and enemies are pressing in. This psalm sounds very different than the psalms that we've been studying for the last few weeks. You don't have to live in this world for very long to know that things are not as they should be. Bad things happen. Sometimes it seems like evil prospers. People get sick. People die. There are enemies. People aren't very nice to us. Maybe we're left out. Maybe we're struggling financially. Maybe just our whole world seems to be crashing down around us. That's when we need the Psalms of Lament. A Psalm of Lament, at its most basic, is an authentic guttural cry out to God, asking, pleading with God to hear and to intervene on the psalmist's behalf. These psalms ask hard questions. God, where are you? Why do I feel alone? Why do I feel like you're not here? My God, why have you forsaken me? But these psalms also process big emotions, difficult emotions, calls for vengeance and revenge, anger, extreme sorrow. We will see all of those in the pages of lament. Lament psalms are the most common psalm type, comprising almost a third of the whole Psalter. In fact, in the first three books of Psalms, so Psalms 1 through 89, it is the dominant type that we see. And I think that's because these Psalms deal with the reality of life. They deal with what is going on in the world around us. We live in a world that's broken. We live in a world that is not as it should be. And we find ourselves over and over in those places where we need God to intervene on our behalf. We need his presence in the midst of our suffering, in the midst of our oppression. And the Psalms of Lament invite us to experience those very real things, experience those very real emotions, such as anger or calls for revenge, desires for revenge, and they invite us to experience those emotions at the feet of our Creator. But these Psalms don't just stop with everything in life is terrible, God help me. Many times they move to a place of praise, and they often express confidence and trust that God will in fact intervene. So as we look at Psalms of Lament, we notice many of them contain similar components. Now, not every Psalm of Lament will contain these components in this particular order, but they contain many of them. Most of them begin with some sort of an invocation to God, calling on God to hear and to respond. Often they'll include an expression of dependence on God or an expectation that God will act. These psalms then include a complaint or a description of what is going on in the psalmist's world that is causing them to want God to act and deliver them. So then, in other words, we could say this is the narrative of the psalmist's suffering. We also will see appeals for God to act. So God, please intervene, do this. We'll see calls for vengeance. Sometimes we'll see a confession of sin, but other times we'll see a declaration of innocence. And often we hear very hard questions asked of God, very Job-like in a lot of ways. And finally, a lot of these psalms will conclude with this expression of confidence in God and a vow to praise him after he has delivered the psalmist. So let's take a look at Psalm 3 as we look at these basic components. Psalm 3 is the first lament psalm in the Psalter, and we see it's a psalm of David, and it's very short. So let's just read it through. Oh Lord, I have so many enemies. So many are against me. So many are saying, God will never rescue him. But you, O Lord, are a shield around me. You are my glory, the one who holds my head high. I cried out to the Lord, and he answered me from his holy mountain. I lay down and slept, yet I woke up in safety, for the Lord was watching over me. I am not afraid of 10,000 enemies who surround me on every side. Arise, O Lord, rescue me, my God. Slap all my enemies in the face. Shatter the teeth of the wicked. Victory comes from you, O Lord. May you bless your people. So this psalm begins with a cry out to God, asking God to act on the psalmist's behalf, saying that there are enemies against him, and that many are saying that God's never going to rescue him. But then we see this expression of confidence. Lord, you are a shield around me. You're my glory, the one who holds my head high. So this expression that this psalmist is confident that God will protect him. We talked about God as refuge. We would see that and said that we would see this theme throughout the Psalms. Well, right here, God is a shield. And in verse 4, the psalmist expressed confidence that God's going to respond based on past action that God has done. But then 5 and 6, we see that the psalmist is declaring further confidence that he can lay down and sleep and wake up in safety because God is watching over him, not being afraid of 10,000 enemies who surround him on every side. So we see this further expression of confidence. And then we see finally here in verses 7 and 8, calling on God to arise and rescue him. And we see this very extreme emotion, slap all my enemies in the face and shatter the teeth of the wicked. So we're going to see difficult emotions in the laments. And this is one of them, calling on God to vindicate him, to intervene on his behalf and wipe away the enemies. And then a statement of victory coming only from the Lord who blesses his people. So like I said, we don't see every element in every lament, but we see many of them here. The psalmist is acknowledging that God is the one who delivers. He calls on God to deliver. He tells God what's happening with the enemies surrounding him. There are so many, and they taunt him. And the psalmist just authentically cries out to God, asking for God to intervene. As we continue our study of laments, we're going to continue to see hard emotions, hard questions, but we also are going to see confidence that we worship a God who does in fact deliver us, who is in fact with us in the midst of our suffering, in the midst of our trials, in the midst of oppression. That is the God we worship. What a wonderful promise. Thanks be to God.